So in this video, we're just going to be creating a Chrome extension that uses Twitch's OpenID Connect endpoint. We're going to piggyback off of that and create a login system for our Chrome extension. So when the user clicks on our browser icon, we give them the option to sign in. We click sign in. There's a Twitch window that pops up. I enter my username. So an object is a password. And per Twitch's rules, there's some two-factor authentication enabled. So you get a little message on your phone. It uses auth. And enter that number. So what is it? 1529785. We'll submit. We'll authorize. And we're logged into our Chrome extension. We click on that icon again, and we're greeted with a sign out page. We click sign out. We click on the icon again, and we have the same sign in page. We click that, and we're signed in. So if this interests you at all, stick around. Let's begin. Learn how to create Google Chrome extensions that take you from A to Z. What is JavaScript? What is HTML? What is CSS? How do they all work together to power web development? All right, let's start by walking you through the Chrome extension, the logic flow. First the visuals of it, then the logic flow. Then we'll get our Chrome app registered with the Twitch developer console. And so when the user clicks on our browser icon, they're going to be greeted with this pop-up page. There's a button there. This is the page right here. That's the button. This is the script accompanying the page. When they click on that button, we're just going to send a message to the background of login. There's another page, a sign out page, which is exactly the same, just a different text on the button. Sign out. When they click on that sign out page, we'll send a message to the back end to log out. So let's look at the back end right now. Close this. Background. All right, so we have a variable to keep track of the user's login status. This is the listener when they send a login message to our background.js. If the user's signed in, we don't really care. If they're not signed in, that's where the meat of our code's going to go. If they send a message of logout, we're just going to flip the user signed in to false and send a successful message back to the original sender, which is the pop-up signed in.html. Now let's look at the manifest. So close this. Let's go to the manifest. It's a basic manifest. You got the name, description, version, manifest version, icons, background. We got the background.js. This guy's important. I'll get back to it in a second. The options page we don't really use in this video, but we'll just keep it there. The browser action, the popup.html. For the permissions, all we need is the identity API. We're going to be using something called launch web auth flow to method that allows us to ping Twitch's OpenID Connect endpoint. And so back to this guy. We need this guy. I'll leave a link in the description below on where to get this. We need this guy to open up JWTs, JSON Web Tokens. And so when we prompt the user to sign in to our Chrome extension using their Twitch, which page should it be? This one? Yeah. So when we prompt the user to sign in to our Chrome extension using their Twitch ID credentials, if there's a successful response, Twitch gives us back a URL down here. So we're going to ping this URL. That's the request. The response is going to be this URL from Twitch. Inside is going to be an ID token and an access token. Now the access token is used to access data about the user who signed in. This guy right here, this is the JWT, the ID token. So let me show you, in case you don't know what that is. Let me, JWT, .io. Yeah, there we go. And so they're going to send a JWT in this guy right here, in the ID token. There's three parts to a JWT. There's the header, so it's encoded. So there's a header, there's the payload, the information, and there's a signature. That library right here, allows us to convert this stuff into this stuff right here. So we're just going to open this stuff up, and we're going to check that you can't see it right here, but there's an ISS, an issuer property. We're going to check that ISS comes from twitch.tv/ whatever their unique URL is. Basically, we're just going to use this library here to open up the JWT, and we'll check some properties within the JWT. If they check out, then we'll successfully sign in the user to our extension. So let me close this, and I'll keep these open. What should we do now? Let me close this file as well. How about all right, so let's register our Chrome extension with the Twitch developer console, and then we'll start writing out the code for the background.js. So we go over to dev.twitch.tv/console/apps, and you'll have to enable two-factor authentication. Twitch will guide you through that process. Once you're here, just click on Applications. Well, let me log in first. Authorize. There you go. So once you're logged in, go to Applications. We'll go to Register Application. Let's do a name here. Let's say Chrome Extension Test OpenID Connect. The redirect URL, that's going to be the ID of your Chrome extension. So make sure it's loaded up into the browser. Copy this. We'll go back over here, and it's going to be an https:// that id.chromium.app.org/. Make sure you have that last trailing slash or it won't work. So we're just going to click Add. There we go. Category, I think there's a browser extension category. Yeah, right there, browser extension. Click Create. We'll go to Manage. There we go. And we're going to need this client ID. We'll just keep this page open for now. And so we're going to construct the URL, this guy right here, all of this stuff. So this is the endpoint you ping or you request from. These are all the properties that you need to include. So we're going to write, what are we going to do? Client ID, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll do 6, and then the nonce will have to be in the function. So we'll do 6 and then 1. So I'll fast forward through this part, but I'm just going to construct the URL like this. We're going to do a const, and the first guy was what? It was the, can't even remember, client ID. There we go. Client underscore ID equals encode component, and we need 5 more of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll just fast forward through this part, and then I'll discuss this stuff. All right, so let's fill out these guys. The client ID is the client ID registered in the console. So that's this guy right here. Copy this, paste this here. Redirect URI is the exact same as this guy right here. So we can copy this, go back, paste that here. Response type, per the docs, we want both. We want the token as well as the access token. And that would be this guy right here. So we want the token and the ID token. So copy this, paste that here. For the scope, do I have that open? No, right here. Scopes. We just want the OpenID scope right here. So OpenID right here. OpenID. For the claims, now Twitch is a bit unique in this, in that they have a separate little object that you pass over. And all the claims are additional information in addition to that JWT stuff. So you can have things like their email, whether or not their email is verified, the picture associated with the account, preferred username, updated at. For this video, we're just going to do the ID token stuff. So let me copy all this, and then we'll delete that user info part. So copy this, and it is going to be a JSON object converted into a string. So we'll say json.stringify, Control V, format. We don't need the user info stuff. There we go. And for the state, now the state is, how should I explain this? A state is unique to the state of your app. The point of the state is that anyone could spoof this redirect URI on your behalf. This state is something made up in real time by your app. So it's basically, it makes your request unique to Twitch. You don't need it, but it's highly recommended. So I'm going to copy and paste some code, and then I'll just quickly explain to you what it does. All right, so I just copied this code. All it does is concatenate some random strings to the string meat. And again, it's based off of your personal app. You can construct it however you want. For this tutorial, we're not going to get too deep into this. It's just a random string of numbers attached to the word meat. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the nonce will handle in the function. So let's create that function now. So we're going to construct the entire URL using a function. We'll call that function, what should we call it? Say Twitch construct create. We'll create Twitch endpoint. And so I'm going to copy and paste some more code because it's very, not complicated, but it's a pain to write. All right, so just copied and pasted a line of code. It's just a random string of, I think, numbers and letters or letters and numbers, just a random string of stuff that you send with the request to make sure that, or not make sure, but 99.99% sure that no one's spoofing or copying your request to Twitch. We call that the nonce value. So let me do this. Let's construct the the URI, and I'll print it out for you so you could see it in all its glory. So let's say let OpenID URL equal, we'll do this, and it starts with this guy right here. This is the endpoint. Control V on that, and we're just going to append all of the information. I'll fast forward to this part for you guys. All right, so I've just constructed that URI or URL. We have the endpoint here, and then we've just attached all of that information here. We've printed to the console so you guys can see it, and of course we return it as the return value for the function. So let's go down here and actually use it. So if they're not signed in, we'll launch the chrome.identity.launch web auth flow. Takes an object. The first is the URL you're gonna ping or request from. So that was what create Twitch endpoint. There we go. Second option is interactive. We'll set this to true. And now Twitch is going to send us back a redirect URI. That's stuff with the ID token and access token. So URI. And let's just print it out to the console. So console.log redirect URI. Let me send a response to the original sender of this request. We'll say message. Actually, let's do this. If there's an error in this API, Chrome will throw an error. So we're just doing if chrome.runtime.last error, like that. We'll send a response of fail. Do this, should be fail. There we go. If not, we'll do a response of success. Else, copy, paste, SUCCSS. Let me zoom up or scroll up. Delete this, console.log, the redirect URI. Let me just throw that here. And there we go. Let me return true in this to keep the message line open. All right, looks good. Let's test it out. Redirect URI, fail, success. All right, good. Let's go here, refresh the extension, give me the background page. Let's do this. Click, sign in. Nonce is not defined. That's because it's not a capital. This guy should be lowercase. There we go. Let's clear the errors, refresh, give me the background page. Let's go to sign in. There you go. That's the constructed URL, Twitch TV authorize, and it's not undefined. These guys shouldn't be question marks. Those should be ampersands. These guys should be ampersands. All right, let's try this again. Let's go back, refresh, sign in. There we go. So let me sign in with my Twitch. Username was an object is and it should be authorize. Okay, there we go. We have the, let me do this so you guys can see the entire string. Let's go back here. Just paste it right here. We're just going to inspect it. Let's go back. This is the redirect URI or URL that sends us back. We're going to extract the access token and the ID token from this string. So not that, Control Z, that stuff. So we're going to need the access token, this stuff right here. And then we're going to need the ID token, which is all of this stuff. This is the JWT all the way up into this. So let's do this. Let me delete this. And should I do that now? Oh, let me show you what happens when you don't sign in successfully. Let's do refresh. Let me sign out of the app in my Twitch account. Twitch.tv. Let's go back to full screen on that. We can go to connections down here. We'll disconnect from that OpenID Connect stuff. So yes, disconnect. Let's go back to the extension, refresh. Sign in again. Should give me the page. Perfect. Let's do a cancel. All right. So if they don't successfully sign in, it's going to give us back this URL. We're just going to check for that. And if that happens, we'll send a message back to the pop-up page of a fail. So in that URL right here, let's go back to the start of this URL. Start. Let's just check for the string. There we go. We'll check for this. error access denied. So let me copy that. So what we're going to say is, if there's an error, we'll do that, or the redirect URI dot includes that string. Error access denied. Then we'll just send back a fail. If not, we have a success. So let's do this. Let me close this. Should I close this? Yeah, I'll close this. I'm going to copy and paste some code. It's not complicated, but it's a bit cumbersome to write, and I'll explain it after I've pasted it. All right, so these 1, 2, 3, 4, these 5 lines just extract the ID token out of that string, out of that redirect URI, as well as the access token. So the ID token is the JWT thing, which I'll explain this line in a second. The access token is the thing you use to get data on the user that's signed into the signed in with their Twitch account. And so with the ID token, we're just using that library here from the manifest, the JSRS whatever. We're just using that to open up the contents of the JWT, specifically the index 1. Index 1 is just, so we split by period. So if I go back here to show you, let's go JSON Web Token verifier. Can we do that? JWT, where would he be? This one. Yeah, perfect. All right, so let's do this. So right now we have this. Let me console.log the user info, and let me do a console.log of the entire ID token. So ID underscore token, and we'll do that right here. Let's go back here. Let's sign in. Give me the background page. Let's go refresh. Sign in. There we go. Let me authorize. Redirect to URI. L is not defined. All right, we don't need to fix that just yet. This guy right here. So copy this. We'll go back here. I'll fix it right now. This should be, let's change this to URL. L, and L. Anyway, so that's the string we got. Control V. Let's copy the ID token out of it. So we don't need any of this. Access token we don't need. We just need the ID token. All that. All the way back down to here. Delete. So the ID token they gave us, I'm going to paste it into a website. It's going to show us what information is in that. So we go back here, close this right here. So Control V, so right here. So we use that program, and it opens up the ID token. We'll display it in user info, but this is what's inside of it. So we're going to check that the issuer, that ISS that I talked about, is Twitch's auth 2. And we'll check the we'll check that the AUD, I think it's the author or something, I forgot what this stands for. But basically this RJLWV, that's this guy right here. RJLWV, that's the client ID. So we're going to go into the code and we're going to check that in the ID token sent back to us, the issuer is this and the odd is this. If those are true, then the user is successfully signed into our app. So let's go back here. Go down here, delete this. I'll keep this console log just so you guys can see it. We're just going to say if the user info.iss is equal to, did I close that? No, I didn't. Good. Let's copy this. And this part's not really needed. You can trust that Twitch did their job. I'm just showing you how JWTs operate, how you can open it up and look at the information inside. And let me just show you, when we did the claims thing, that additional information, the email and whether or not the email is verified, they pass that in here. Email is verified, true. Let's go back. So we needed the, where is it? Issuer is equal to that. And the userinfo.aud is equal to the client ID, which I can just say this, client ID. Now, if that's the case, successful response. There we go, user signed in. So let me do this, user signed in. Status is equal to true. And we need to flip the page the user's viewing. Where can I copy that? We'll copy that right here. So copy this, yank this, So if they've successfully signed in, we're going to change the pop-up page to the pop-up sign out page, which is just the pop-up signed in already. So signed in, message success. That's good. All right, let's test this out. So I'll close these. Actually, I just close this here. Let me do a refresh. What was the error again? ID token, URL. We cleared that up. Refresh. Let me go back here. Let's do a sign in. There we go. That's the user info stuff. And the pop-up message window closed. So as you can see, there's the email verified, the AUD, the client ID, the issuer right there. Let's click on the button here. Let's sign out. Let's click on the button. We should get the sign in page. Sign in again. There you go. Now let's do something unique to Twitch's little flow here. Let's see if I can find it on their page. If not, I'll just tell you what it is. Authentication. I think it was interval periodically. There we go. And so something unique to Twitch's little, their little flow of authenticating the user on behalf of their endpoint is that you have to periodically conduct an audit, basically test that the access token that you had, and there's an access token here. Do we have a variable for that? I don't think we did. Why didn't it blow up if we don't have a variable? All right, let's add a variable for this, access token as well as an interval ID, and I'll show you why in a second. We'll do that right here. We'll do let access token equal null. Say let's go interval ID. So you have to check, I think it was basically every 60 minutes. I think it was every 60 minutes that the user, that access token is valid. Because if the user does something that I did like this, where I did let me do a refresh here, where I disconnected from the app that I gave permission to, if I disconnect like this, they don't, just because I disconnected on my end, the user disconnects on their end, they don't send a message to your app saying, hey, the user has disconnected your app from their Twitch account. Could you please sign them out of your app? There's no message there. And so we have to, on our app's end, we have to periodically check that the access token we get, this guy right here, is valid. And so right here, we're going to create an interval right here. And all that interval is going to do is it's going to check every 60 minutes that the access token is valid. We're going to be using this URL here. I'll leave all of these links in the description right here. And so we send the access token to this endpoint. And if it's valid, we get a certain response. If it's not valid, we get a different response. So let's do it here. We'll do interval ID is equal to, and we'll do what we're going to do. We're going to do a set interval, run some code. It has to be every 60 minutes, I think, which is, what is 60 minutes in milliseconds? It's 3,600,000. That should be 60 minutes. And so every 60 minutes, we're going to do a fetch call to that URI or endpoint. Copy this. We'll do a fetch call. And we need to send the access token in the header. So header, is it headers or headers? Yeah, it's headers. And so authentication, we'll do an authentication, and the authorization, not authentication, excuse me. Authorization, and it was, what's the format? OAuth space the access token. So we'll do OAuth, capital A, yeah. We'll do space, and then we'll append the access token, which is access token. Now in that fetch, we'll do a .then response. We'll do something here, and we'll just do a catch here, catch. We'll just do a res dot whatever. We'll just do this console.log the error. So let's make this guy error. All right, so we're going to check is just the status of the response. So if the response status, I think it was 401 for denied, that means the access token has expired. The user has signed out on their end. So we're just going to say user signed in for our extension is equal to false. And then we'll just clear the interval. That was interval ID. And that should be it. So we set the interval. Every 60 minutes, we try and validate the token. If it's not valid, we sign the user out of our extension. That looks good. Let me just test that it works. The refresh. How would I test this working? Let's do this. Let's do a console.log of the res.status. Put that there. And I won't wait 60 minutes. Let's do it every 5 seconds. Yeah, we'll do 5 seconds. Save. Let's go back here. Background page. On the right. Let's sign in. Here we go. Let's do an authorize. Let's wait 5 seconds. See what the background spits out. 4, 5. There we go. So the access token is still valid at 200. If it wasn't valid, it would be a 401. So the logic of that periodic checking of the access token works. Let's stop that. Let's refresh this. Let's turn it back to 60 minutes. Which is what, 3,600,000. All right, so that looks good for the login system based on Twitch's OpenID Connect endpoint. Anyways, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I will see you guys the next one.